Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Side Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
Hello,
First one
guys.
was a lot better.
Hello.
Hello.
This is the second take. I apologize.
What's fine?
I can't work under these conditions. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing well. Everyone's looking
Yeah.
good. Will, you're in a new location per usual.
You're in the
Yeah.
hat shop.
Everything feels exactly the same. Like nothing has changed at all, but the background is different every day.
Things
Norm,
to keep
you have depth of field. You have bokeh this week.
I know his bokeh he turned up the bokeh knob.
Yeah.
I'm using real lenses.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah.
fancy.
Anyone can do it. It's not that difficult. I mean, if we're going to be doing this a long time, might as well set up the gear to do it and look good in the zooms. But if you're watching the video, Adam, you are not just wearing a maybe Savage Industry t-shirt or Tesla t-shirt, but you're also wearing like an apron. What is this?
I am. I started wearing it last week. And it's changed my life. I have like 3 aprons hanging behind the door in the bathroom, and I have never come on. All right. Maggie came by to say hi. And I've never been an apron wearer in a shop. I was back in ILM days. I had a Ben Davis that went down to the knee, that buckled behind your legs. And I really liked that one. But for the most part, I haven't worn an apron forever. And then last week I was noticing, I was doing all this specific machining. I've been losing my calipers and losing my pen and my Sharpie and stuff. And I pulled this one off, and I'm just loving wearing the apron, and I'm just wearing it all day long now. It feels great. And I take it off and my pants aren't covered with dust. My pockets aren't filled with sawdust. It's delightful.
So it's less about the protection for your clothes because you're not welding normally. You're doing milling, you're doing woodworking, and you are happy to be covered in sawdust and just kind of hose yourself clean with air afterward. It's about the tool access. And it looks like the apron you have has right in the center of your chest places for your Pica pens, your pencil.
It's fantastic. I've got 2 loops for little thwackers that I can carry on my belt. It's got a plethora of pockets, and I'm really digging this one. Right, here's my square. It was in the wrong pocket. Anyway,
utility apron.
Is it oilcloth, Adam?
It is. It does feel like a waxed canvas with leather accents, and I'm trying to see if somebody put a maker's mark in this. I feel like somebody made this for me, or okay, we got to figure out who gave this to me, because it's got this little Lone Star here in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody out there made this or sent this to me, I would like to thank you, because it's my new favorite thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's also one of the things that I'm sure that if you just started wearing it last week, but as you're going to wear this over the coming weeks, you're going to have efficiencies that you want married to it. And it might be something that we get people to make their own.
Well, and I've got this, it's funny that you say that, because I've been doing so much specific, precise machining recently that I came to a new conclusion about a tool I've been using for 30 years. And I'm about to do it. Right after this, I'm going to shoot a tool tip about it, because I've been using this specific tool for 30 years. And just last week I was like, you know what? I need a different version of this tool. And it surprised me, but it's also a really good inflection point for talking about tool usage, because even if you consider yourself a quote unquote expert in some specific tool, there may be some new thing you try with it where you need a modification to it that you didn't expect. And a new point of view can show up at any given moment. And I kind of like being awake to that.
It's always interesting when something, your understanding of something that you're really familiar with, that's fundamentally changes, which doesn't happen that often.
Well, so, I mean, I used to talk about I've talked at length about the research process on Mythbusters, where I would engage with some canon of material I had no idea about, and I would investigate it until I had a point of view. And the moment I had a point of view about it, then I had something to contribute, right? And that was that realizing that that's what was happening, realizing that I was going through the investigation until I had a point of view, was a great feeling, that moment at which a little flag pops up in the mailbox of your head and says, there's a new message here. But I have rarely experienced a new point of view for something I have so much history with. And yet, you know, new usage, new way of looking at it. And all of a sudden, it's like I went from digital calipers to dial calipers because I wanted to know which side of the line I was on. I wanted a more physical approach to the numbers that I was using.
It's really easy to get stuck in a workflow and take a process for granted because there's so many.
Yeah.
And once you're happy with something, you know, why bother changing it? But yeah, taking a step back is hard to do.
It's again, being awake to the differences and the nuances of that within a shop is lovely. I mean, and like, you know, I'm in here building every single day now, filming every single day. And I've rarely been in such regular production and it feels great. And also like my attitude towards the shop is changing all the time. Come on, sweetie, come here. Come on.
Maggie wants to sit on Adam's lap.
Oh, she does.
And there she
Aw,
goes.
Went on a walk.
Hi, Maggie.
But she just wanted a little bit of,
Oh,
Oh,
what a good girl.
she's your girl on Monday, the day of recording this. There's no transition. We're going to talk about His Girl Friday, guys.
Wait, today's
Nice
Monday,
segue.
Norm.
Yes, I know.
His Girl Friday. Holy cow. Okay. Can we set the frame here?
Let's do that.
Yeah.
This is a Howard Hawks film, a classic and important Hollywood director, the inventor of that quick style of rapid fire speech with all sorts of like characters talking over each other. It's very funny. The Coen brothers famously paid great homage to it in the Hudsucker Proxy. Jennifer Jason Leigh saying it took sometimes 20 or 30 takes to talk as fast as she was talking in that movie. His Girl Friday is Rosalind Russell and Cary Grant at their absolute best. When is It's a Wonderful Life? Is that 38?
Yeah, and this is 40. So
Yeah.
This is 40,
right
yeah.
after.
Yeah, this is 1940. Do you know how old Cary Grant was when he made this?
He looked like he was like 27.
36. He's 36.
Good
years
God,
old.
he's almost 40 years old in 1940 and he looks like that? Wow.
There's
He was
just a
pretty
way in
old
which
in
he's
North by
ageless.
Northwest.
You
Yeah.
know, John Landis told me that the old Hollywood stars like Cary Grant literally glowed like they had a light inside them. Like it was really like, it was so, there was such an aura around them. And I was like, what about someone like George Clooney? And he was like, no, Bill Clinton's the closest we got.
And
That
even
was
though
like 10 or 12 years ago.
you know, Cary Grant's probably the more famous of the actors here, it really is more of a Rosalind Russell movie. So
And she's
we're gonna do
amazing.
we're gonna do like a whole spoiler
Yeah.
discussion about it, but it's you know it's a 60-year-old film now, so there's not much to spoil. But if you haven't seen it yet, it is on the
80-year-old film.
Yeah, Norm.
oh my
It's
god
2020.
forever it's 2000 in my head. That's how old we are when
But
we think
It's
it's always
It's
turn of the
Forever It's
century.
2000
No,
in
no,
my head is the lead single of Norm's boy band.
that's a Stephen King thing. He says that we always picture ourselves, our mental picture of ourselves is locked when we turn 19. And you always imagine yourself at 19 from that point forward.
Yeah.
I think he's off by a few years, but you know.
No, I think I actually think that everyone has a different age that they lock off at. Mine was 13. I weirdly feel like I locked off around 13 in terms of a lot of the ways in which I think.
Okay.
But 80-year-old film.
80-year-old movie.
Yeah.
Yep. And we'll go deep into the plot, but it's a screwball comedy, right? Like you said,
Well,
it's fast
It
paced.
kind of.
It's ostensibly a screwball comedy, but man, it drips.
It gets dark. I mean, when
Oh, yeah, no.
yeah.
Well, the
darkness is-
premise is Rosalind Russell and Cary Grant were married. She was a reporter. He was the editor of a newspaper, and she's going to tell him that she's getting remarried and that she's getting married tomorrow, essentially. It's a
And-
final goodbye, and she's leaving that life.
And he's a big time New York, right? New York City
It seems like New York City, yeah.
newspaper editor. And like, he is, you know, he's the not Rupert Murdoch, but he's like the big time publisher of the paper. And she's like his lead reporter.
He's
Yes.
J. Jonah Jameson. He's the editor of the paper.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's there. He's doing the work day to day. It is very quickly becomes clear that he's probably a little bit crooked in a way that a lot of like high powered business people in that time period might have been. And
And
it's go
the
ahead.
plot of the movie is his attempt to get her back through essentially like pushing her buttons and prodding her and gaslighting her and working through their existing relationship in the midst of a murder trial,
Giving her the kind of the prompts that she needs to get the taste back for the life that she left behind.
Right.
Yep.
It's like the script in this thing, it's so, I can only imagine what the reviews were like when Howard Hawks movies first came out and you started seeing characters talking over each other in film, because I'm sure that it was incredibly discomforting for the audience in a way that we're used to that now. But this doesn't have as much of the cadence that like a modern, like a Coen Brothers movie is very intentional. And like when they're talking over each other like that, there's a cadence and they come in at really specific cues and they go out specific cues. So it's a little bit lyrical and there's kind of an up and down. And with this, that happened in places, but it feels like it was more of a happy accident than intentional.
Well, again, I'm not so hang on. Hey mom, do you want to come in? My mom and I watched it last night. Here.
Oh, nice.
Have a seat. Sure. Have a seat.
so
Special guest.
Will
Mom's been sorting Legos for a week
Oh.
now.
Hey.
Hold on,
Will, it was 100% intentional. So
okay.
it was
but
in the
What I'm
script.
curious about, I mean, you were young when this movie came out, but like when you were a teenager, were movies like this kind of the norm? Was that like what you expected from a movie, a screwball comedy?
I don't think so. One of the things that struck me about this movie is that it's so unreal. Nobody's ever tried to make a real atmosphere like they do today, like the Coen Brothers would make a real atmosphere. This is all like a stage play.
It did. It felt very much like a screwball stage play, like the play that goes wrong.
Yeah.
It's like that level of speed of action.
And that's what it originally was.
Yeah.
So it was a stage
true.
play. And then this was turned into a film called The Front Page in 1931. And then His Girl Friday is actually a remake of that movie. But in The Front Page, it was two male coworkers. And what Howard Hawks brought in was turning one of the characters into a woman and giving them the existing marriage.
The other thing that I found amazing about it is that the script requires that both of these characters, who do repeatedly super reprehensible things in the movie, have enough charisma that you constantly forgive them. And they really, really do have, like, Rosalind Russell's charisma. I mean, Cary Grant's charisma is famous. Rosalind Russell's charisma is shocking and amazing.
It is.
She did way fewer reprehensible things than he did.
Oh, to be sure.
She did maybe one or two reprehensible things, and he has a whole like rogues gallery of awful, like passing the counterfeit money off, getting the new husband arrested
having her
twice,
fiance arrested 3 times in one day.
Yeah, kidnapping the mother-in-law and hauling her off, maybe to her doom, but it turns out she was okay, maybe a little ruffled. Like
Well, let me mention one thing in here which really struck me. In the middle of all of this,
We're going to get to this in just a second.
okay,
Yeah, we're moving our way towards the super darkness.
because that's
No, I know. Both of us. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Norm.
Are we gonna?
And understandably, in that era, like so many of these films of the mid 30s and early 40s have to be viewed through that kind of even pre-Mad Men lens, where the audiences readily accepted that type of male-female relationship, right? When you think of movies like The Thin Man, right, that is a loving couple, right?
Mhm.
But they are ripping each other, but it's clearly an unequal relationship where the man is still at the top here, and you see that here as well.
The sexual and gender hierarchies are
Yeah.
totally extant. The
Yeah.
politics are bizarre. There's some outright crazy racism right in the middle of everything.
Oh yeah, like
pickaninny.
I know.
OMG.
yeah, it was. There were multiple surprising moments in terms. I mean, it's an 80-year-old movie, so the thing that cracked me up as I was watching this and I saw the opening reel and it's like, hey, this is based on a play that's based on a movie. I was like, oh, So already by 1940, Hollywood was going back to the well multiple times on the same property just because they knew it worked before.
Oh, totally. Maltese Falcon was made 3 separate times.
Right.
Yeah, all in the 30s and the 40s. Absolutely. Philadelphia Story became High Society. And I know some people who think High Society is better. If you're out there, I don't want to know about it. It's like showing me some war wound I don't want to see.
But the movie, I think, has enduring appeal because of the charisma, because of the charm, and even accepting the lens of the 40s that we watch it through. There are very few films like it. It's why the Coen brothers riffed on it, is because those two characters are unique in the movie themselves. Everyone else is talking at a much slower pace. They're above them, and then they bring you into their little club of their brand of intellectualism.
Well, and when you watch them do their business, and perhaps my favorite scene in the movie is when Cary Grant meets Rosalind Russell's fiance.
Oh, at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
As he's meeting the fiance and pretending he's mistaking the fiance for somebody else, he's doing all of these levels of stuff. They're both having like 2 conversations each. And then there's 2 other characters that are attempting to speak. And both Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell's complete mastery of every little beat. I've been watching 30 Rock, and one of my favorite things about 30 Rock is watching how well actors like Alec Baldwin hit every comedy note with just the perfect amount of inflection, like Yo-Yo Ma, and watching Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell going back and forth, having these conversations at a speed which seems impossible. One of the things I was grateful for, Norm, was that you told me to turn on subtitles, and
yes.
I did.
So I didn't turn on subtitles. My favorite scene was when Cary Grant comes to the press room in the Hall of Justice.
Yeah.
And they've locked the MacGuffin in the desk, and and they're on the phone, and they're running, I think, 3 or 4 different simultaneous phone calls between the 2 of them while running interference on anybody who comes to the door, and it is just the most like madcap slapstick 4-minute scene, and like, it's interesting because the cinematography is really straightforward. It's a straight shot across the table, and you just see all these phones sitting around, and she has one thing up to one ear and one thing up to the other. They're leaning around. They're using the physicality of the phones. It's very good. It made me very happy the whole way.
It's I Love Lucy, right?
Yeah.
And there's also some really like beautifully efficient character development within the script and the performance. When Rosalind Russell, the first shot is her walking into the newsroom. You watch her walking in, saying hello to everybody, and right away you're on her side. You see that everyone really likes her. You see that they like her for the right reasons, that there's all these hardened reporters, and she's wearing some couture weirdness with like stripes and stuff, and
the made for black and white movies striped jacket. Yeah.
And then she fits right in. By the way, it was hard for me to find a non-colorized version of this film, but I did.
Oh.
It was on
the Criterion
version.
One is
Yeah.
black and white.
I didn't watch it on Criterion. I watched it on, right. Okay. I forgot the Criterion bit. But I found a nice crisp copy, and the cinematography is also gorgeous. The newsroom is an incredible set. All these actors, is really well done. Come on, mate. No, she just wants to
just rejected over and over again.
Welcome to my world.
It's also, it's about journalism, and it's about the perception of the media. And it's funny when they're in the Hall of Justice and all those other journalists are riffing with each other, and then the farce that becomes how they want to tell their angles for the story, right? Like, that's something that even 20 years ago would be difficult to understand, like how important it was for those newspaper writers, like the story they told about a crime was how the entire city would understand it, and they were still writing clickbait.
They totally were writing clickbait, and the film does not think much of journalists. In fact, its opening salvo is that text that says, "Oh, this shouldn't." It literally is like wink, wink, waka, waka, telling you this has no resemblance to modern day reporters. Wink, wink.
Well, but I mean, when was the movie supposed to take place in the 20s or 30s? Like, that's the thing I don't get.
I think it was contemporary,
Contemporary.
right? I think it's
Okay, so they were saying
40s. Also, so let's talk about this darkness for a minute, because the movie goes from the newsroom to the Hall of Justice, where the story really is at. There's a man going to be hanged the following morning. Cary Grant's trying to get Rosalind Russell to cover the story because he knows that when she covers it, the public will swing to his side of the story. And in the middle of all the action in the Hall of Justice, the whole second half of the movie's in the Hall of Justice, a woman who's a character runs through the room and jumps out a window and kills herself in the middle of the film.
well, yeah,
I'm still wrapping my head around how
it's not just that. It's a woman whose only connection to the story is that she showed some kindness to the murderer.
Yeah.
And then was hooked to him in the press.
Yeah.
And it's destroyed her life to the point that she jumps out of the window.
Right.
Like,
so the press kills her. Right. Yeah.
But nobody
Yeah.
ever mentions it again either.
No.
After she's gone out the window, it's like, okay.
There's like
one
a
of the
little bit
guys
of
says her
dark
leg
moment.
was moving.
What's that?
One of the reporters says, I think her leg's moving. She's probably okay.
So,
But I mean,
it's so unfathomable to me.
more than like the story of the murderer. It's funny. It's a racially tinged story that's tinged the other way than we usually see racially tinged stories presented today.
Oh, right, because he's being tried for murder because he shot a black policeman.
Right, and the mayor doesn't want to lose the black community's vote in the next election on Tuesday, so they have to hang the guy. And the guy who I don't know who plays the murderer, but he plays such a 40s sad sack in like
he's literally like, I didn't do it.
I feel
Do we
really
ever find
upset.
out why he did do it? We don't. We don't
No.
You know,
find out what really happened.
when there's guns in a situation, then gun violence is much more likely to happen. That seemed like the what happened to me.
I mean, it's a very cynical, right, plot, and the cynicism in the politics, in the journalism, in the justice system. I mean, that's just the base again for like these two, this ex husband and wife to have their back and forth.
Yes, I found myself fascinated by the woman killing herself in the middle of the suicide in the middle of the film. And I found myself wondering if it didn't have to do with the fact that it's 1940 and Europe is falling apart at that moment in time. And the film references Hitler and the Nazis and the Red Scare, all of it of a piece. So there's a way in which I'm finding myself wondering if there's a feeling, a sort of a cultural feeling of societal instability that plays into the acceptability of a suicide in the middle of a screwball comedy.
Right. So you're saying
cheaper.
The audience expected that because of the chaos happening in the real world. And so for it to be believable, they had to be cynical that way.
By the end of the film, I found myself wondering, look, if I was friends with David Fincher, and I wish I was, if I knew David Fincher, I would call him up and say, I think you should watch this movie, and I think you should attempt to make a serious non-comedy version of this where it's all sold. Because
I was going to say, yeah,
it fits his mold of exploration, I think, really well. His sort of central thesis about his films is that human beings are essentially perverted. And like, that's a kind of central feature of us. Like, we're all perverts to a certain extent. And there's a way in which that grids beautifully right into this film, right? It feels a little like, plus the fact that, by the way, we haven't even gotten to the cinematography is super beautiful. Really, really gorgeous. When Rosalind Russell goes in to meet the murderer in his cage in the Hall of Justice, it's like a cage in a room with a stark shadow on it. It's all very gorgeously lit.
The Hannibal Lecter intro in Silence of the Lambs, where Jodie Foster goes in to see him in the glass cage, is 100% had to be in the mind.
I feel like you're right. I feel like you're absolutely right.
But let me point out the way Rosalind Russell bribes the jailer. Just like an everyday event as she goes in there.
Well, but so we touched on this earlier. I really don't think Rosalind Russell did all that many awful things. Bribing the jailer is maybe the worst one, right?
Oh, no. The worst one is literally forgetting that her fiance is leaving her forever because she's in the middle of writing a story. She becomes effectively a lizard at that point. She can't even hear him over the din of her desire to be a journalist.
She was in the zone, man. She was pounding out the words.
Listen, the degree to which all those hardened reporters at the Hall, that group of reporters at the Hall of Justice was a wonderful ensemble. Like, you were warmed up for it by her walking through the press room of the Tribune. But when you get to the Hall of Justice, those guys playing poker and carrying on 3 conversations at once are amazing. And the degree to which they love her and respect her is, again, this like wonderful deepening of the character development of her. Like, you're really on her side throughout the whole film because of how much the other characters are explicating to you. This is a really rare and amazing practitioner of this craft.
It was so interesting to see their professional courtesies they would extend each other, while at the same time also trying to backstab each other to get the lead, to get the story. But they would have their natural boundaries. The fact that they would all share the same room, have the phone lines direct access to their newsrooms, and respect that as an operating procedure. But at the same time, trying to fish and, again, write their clickbait, it's not something we see today.
No, and then
when
you see them all, like you were saying, Norm, when you see them all jump on the phone and you hear 5 different reporters' versions of the story, none of them are similar and none of them reflect reality.
Well, but there's also these wonderful moments where they're all rattling off the stories as fast as they can, and one of them hears out of the corner of his ear one of the other guys drop a line. He's like, "Oh, I got to put that one in," and he drops it in the end of his line. It's mercenary in a way that's really, really charming. So
I gotta ask you guys, were you rooting for them? Were you rooting for Cary Grant's character to succeed in wooing her back and convincing her?
Hold on. You answer this. I'm going to answer my front door.
I was rooting for him. I was rooting for them to get back together.
You can't root against Cary Grant.
That fiance was so milquetoast and awful, and the mother was just dreadful. Oh my God.
The mother, I absolutely get, was put in. I wanted her to get away. Like, it felt. I think the film did a really good job. Rosalind Russell to be able to feel like she could, get away from Cary Grant, get away from that life.
Oh, you wanted. You did. I was the opposite. I thought that's where she belonged. Clearly.
For me, it was a weird construct.
It looked like it would be an awful fate to me.
Well, it's a very of the time construct to make put the heroine in a situation where her choices are man A, who maybe has her best intentions best anyway. He's trying to do the best for her, but is kind of a dirtbag, and milquetoast Gordon Bellamy, not Gordon Bellamy. Yeah.
Look, there were countless ways in which the plot of this film gridded beautifully on a whole bunch of like Matthew McConaughey, Kate Hudson romantic comedies, right? In the same way that, they're ludicrously unrealistic, like The Wedding Planner, who like can't make ends meet, somehow lives in a gigantic 4-bedroom apartment with a view in New York City, kind of ludicrous, right? But I found so many of the juxtapositions of this film really shocking in a way that Philadelphia Story isn't. Philadelphia Story, which also has its own brand of like totally messed up sexual politics and social classism, right? It's at least very consistent. In this film, you had screwball comedy and yet really beautiful, beautiful cinematography, which you don't often see necessarily. You had crazy, ridiculous plot devices and a suicide, super dark stuff happening right in the middle.
It was a funny suicide, Adam.
we both were watching. We were like, what the?
I mean, the fact that there's a murder, the murder is essentially the plot that they're reporting on, and the murder is taken as a farce. Like, no one really cares. None of the characters care what happens to the actual guy. He's the only one who cares. And we see him as an audience as a sad sack, right? Yeah. That tells you everything you need to know about what the movie wants us to care about. And it's clearly
Yeah.
not about any of the other people's lives except whether these two get back together.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that kept getting me was they kept on focusing on the gibbet where he was going to hang the next day, and
Yeah.
that was really dark and scary.
The,
You know,
the
they kept
clank.
coming back to that like 4 times and showed the thing going down.
Well, that and they're also constantly in physical danger. Like at one point, there's a gun battle going on outside, and all the reporters run to the window, and the window gets shot out next to them. None of them flinch, and you're just like, "Wow."
Also, when the girl who eventually commits suicide is asking for their sympathy, the degree to which they verbally kick her to the curb, they not only don't want to hear her story, they're literally insulting her for having emotions over their lying in the press and ruining her life.
Yeah.
But I mean, that gives a really good contrast to the way they treat Hildy, right? Like that shows you, hey, these are horrible sexist people who have let this woman into their world because they respect her work, apparently, or something. Yeah. I don't know what they respect, but
she's pretty.
I think this all serves to talk about something that's kind of interesting, which is like, we often think of black and white movies from the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s as quaint portions of our culture, right? With easy plots and simplistic, and nothing could be further from the truth. There are some obviously there's some surpassingly beautiful films, dark films, crazy stuff. I remember being shocked at how moved I was watching Gilda. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, I didn't know a black and white movie could make me feel that way. When I first watched it, I was probably 20 or something like that. And there's just this, within film history, this rich mine of real bizarre strangeness. And I had no idea what I was in for in watching this film.
And most of those are character studies. I mean, not a lot happens because the effects weren't there and you can only have so many sets. And so it all had to be on the characterizations and the dialogue.
Yeah. And I think this was 3 sets in this whole, 3 or 4 sets maybe in this whole film.
Newsroom.
And it all takes place inside of like 18 hours.
Yes. Yeah. It's super, super
fast. The other thing that got me was, even though it was very unreal, it was gripping. I wasn't bored for a minute. I was gripped during the whole thing, but there was that unreal quality, you know?
I wasn't bored, but I was not moved. And that's the one that Philadelphia Story always moves me when I watch it.
I was going to say, the thing about this is, if anything, I felt like the ending, at some point they're just like, well, we're not going to get a satisfactory conclusion, so let's just wrap this one up real quick and move on to the credits.
That's exactly what it felt like. All right, everyone, we're out of money. Clock out.
Yeah.
I don't want to go.
Yeah, she stays with Cary Grant. Send the guy that looks like Richard Bellamy to Eureka or Albany, or wherever he's going.
Albany.
Ralph Bellamy. I've gotten it wrong 3 times now. So,
and they end up exactly back where they start, where they're going to go on a honeymoon, but she falls in the same trap of not having a real honeymoon, and so it's like that in the way a Shakespearean play. It just ends. It's a farce that ends exactly where it started.
Right.
Adam, why does Philadelphia Story get you?
It's a good question. I've been wondering that, because it's not like, I'm not sure, except that there's a way in which Macaulay, the character played by Jimmy Stewart, the way he and Tracy Lord, the character played by Katharine Hepburn, the way they see each other, and thus we get to see them, the way they see each other's depth, because they're the 2 main characters of that film.
Yeah, so
not
for people
Cary
who haven't
Grant.
seen it, right? That's the thing. It's in many ways there are parallels, because it's Cary Grant kind of getting his way back with an ex-wife, Katharine Hepburn.
Cary Grant is, I submit, he is an ancillary character. He's not one of the protagonists. He's a supporting character to Jimmy Stewart and Katharine Hepburn. And there's a way in, like, one of my favorite bits in the film is when Jimmy Stewart goes to the library. First, he meets the librarian who says, "What is the wish?" And then gets this smile on his face because he's like, "Wow, what universe am I in?" "Thank thou," he says. And then he looks down and he sees Katharine Hepburn, and she's reading his book. She's gone to the library to look him up, and she's reading his book. And now she drops all pretense and says, "What is this with you? You talk like that and you write this. This is beautiful." And there's a way in which they see each other that I find super moving, because both of them are really have incredibly airtight personas that they go out in the world and express, and yet they each see through each other in a way that I find lovely.
And it's a classical romanticized story in that they are never meant to be for each other, and they don't end up together because they're of different worlds. But in this one weekend where their spheres intersect, being of different worlds and different classes, they reveal to each other things they didn't know about each other, and they want it, but they also then take a step back and say, this is not how things are supposed to be.
And I'm not even sure. I mean, I recognize that it's that there's a lot of classism going on there, but I don't feel like that's the emotional center of why they do and don't get together. There's a way in which there's depth to both of those characters revealed in the middle of the film that to me is the sort of the center of gravity of Philadelphia's story. And His Gal Friday has none
Doesn't
of that.
have that. Right. It's very surface level for the laughs. It's a really interesting comparison, because the more I think about it, it's absolutely right. It's the same, essentially very similar plots: a woman about to get married and an ex-husband trying to get her back, but the way it all resolves and is very
well.
different.
And everybody I've ever told Philadelphia Story is one of my all-time favorite films says, "Oh, you got to watch His Girl Friday. It's as good, if not better." And I mean, it is amazing, but for me, it's not nearly in the same category.
Well, if you want that emotional catharsis in His Girl Friday, they've already like that time in their relationship is past, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, everybody knows where they stand coming into the opening scene of this film.
Well, I mean, it would have required a whole separate character arc where Rosalind Russell's the film is ostensibly about her realizing she's a reporter, but a real emotional arc for her would be to really witness that happening and really witnessing what she's willing to give up for that. They make it a screwball comedy, but again, I submit this is an amazing film for David Fincher to make someday. David Fincher, if any of you listening knows David Fincher, call him up and tell him you got to do a serious dark version of His Girl Friday. With Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. That's what that's my pitch.
I'm doing that a lot now too. I'm watching a lot of the old films on Criterion, and I'm imagining recasting those who would be great today to play those archetypes, those roles, with the baggage of the celebrity that they have.
Yeah.
I said last week, I think I was watching What's Up, Doc? It's the Barbra Streisand Ryan O'Neal film, and Ryan O'Neal that's Ryan Reynolds. Right, in a modern movie today, that would be that role.
Totally. Ryan O'Neal. Oh my God.
Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, I know Barry Lyndon. Barry Lyndon's such a brutal movie. All right, I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up.
Yes, we'll take suggestions for other movies, and things that you think we should watch, things that might be in the Criterion collection, older movies.
Let me tell you one to watch. And I don't know if we'll do a spoiler cast about this, but have you ever seen the original Cat People?
No.
It is both scary and sexy in a way that will surprise you.
It's called Cat People?
Cat People. It's the original Cat People, the one that was remade into a film with Natasha Kinski. Ed Begley Jr. loses his arm in it. It's not a great reboot. But the original Cat People, about a werecat, effectively, about people who turn into cats, is a genuinely scary kind of monster movie. Horror film.
All right. I'm going to dig that up.
No. Oh, it's great. It's great.
Maybe we'll make that our next one.
Yeah.
Hey, can I shout out my favorite thing about this movie is that at some point, Cary Grant is sending somebody to find the new husband, and he says, "Oh, he's about this tall. He looks like this. He looks a little bit like Ralph Bellamy." and that is
That's the actor.
it's the actor. Yeah, it's the easiest joke in the world in a film, but it has cracked me up every single time it's ever happened, except for maybe in whichever of the Ocean's movie Julia Roberts played somebody who looked kind of like Julia Roberts.
Well, and Ralph Bellamy was at the peak of his fame.
Oh yeah,
in 1940, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
The movie also has great painting backdrops, and this is a complete tangent, but I want to give a shout out. I recently bought this book, The Art of the Hollywood Backdrop. It's not about matte paintings, but it's literally about the largest paintings ever made in the world, 100 feet wide, 40 feet tall. These are the paintings you see
Out the windows.
out the windows, the skylines when Dorothy opens and goes to Oz, the trees in the
Yeah.
background. These are the backdrops. And there's a company in LA that bought hundreds of these from MGM, from the studios to restore them. And there's a project to try to send them to universities and send them to museums for free, just for shipping, just to make sure that they're shared with, production design
Oh, that's
classes.
awesome.
Oh,
and
that's
art
amazing.
classes.
Yeah.
I'll include some links below.
Awesome.
But watching these old films makes me want to appreciate that. These Hollywood backings.
Norm, that's
Cool.
fabulous. What's coming up on the site this week, Norm?
We got 2 of your builds. So I will just say, sword rack. That's all I'll say.
Are you finally getting a sword rack for the pickup truck?
No,
put it in the back there?
No.
Oh, okay.
Damn.
So look forward to that. It's good to
Well,
see you.
It's good to see you on the Tech Pod this week. We did we talked about ARM on OS 10, running OS 10 on ARM at length, and like the pros and cons of that, and why Apple, after 10 years or 15 years of using Intel chips, is going to probably change to mobile, what have been previously until this point mobile chips, probably next year.
And well, you can find that at
techpod.content.town. Thank you, Norm.
perfect.
Thank you for letting me crash your party.
Good to see you, Karn.
All right, guys. See you next week.
Bye,
See you
guys.
next week.
Bye.
Bye.